So we're here today because we've had a lot of parents and supporters send us in questions that they'd like us very much to answer. We've put all the questions in a bowl and we're going to have a go at answering them in a minute. So we're here drawing on our experience of being admissions tutors at different colleges. So I'm Sam, admissions tutor at Newnham.
I'm Chris, admissions tutor at Cumberland Keys.
And I'm Jonathan, admissions tutor at Churchill.
So shall we make a start?
Yeah.
Okay, right, let's go for a first question. My student's school doesn't have a very good success rate with getting people into Cambridge, and I'm worried that this will affect his chances.
Yeah, well, it won't. When a student applies to a particular course, the important thing is not whether or not they go to a school that's got a success rate in getting into a particular university, right? It's that they've thought their way through applying to the course, they know what they're moving towards, they made a considered decision, they've got a strong application. That's not necessarily something to do with school background in that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a kind of flagging system and for context, and one of our flags is a flag for an applicant who comes from a school with very little history of successful application to Oxford and Cambridge, so we absolutely do take that into account as well.
Yeah. So I think the first port of call for anybody should be looking at the website, where we try to make all of the advice and guidance available for students, but also for parents, teachers, carers, anybody who might be kind of, looking after someone who is thinking of applying.
Who wants to go next?
Come on, I'll have a go. Thanks. Okay, so we come from a low-income background. Is there additional support available?
So yes, absolutely. Cambridge University has a really strongly held and long-held commitment to support any UK student from a low-income background to make sure they can get the most out of Cambridge. Obviously, the best place to look is the website for current figures, but there will be several £1,000s worth of support for people from particularly low-income backgrounds, and then a sliding scale of support above that. But actually, we find our students find Cambridge a relatively cheap place to be a student, even though that might not seem obvious right at the start.
Yeah, and one of the big reasons for that is the short terms and the way accommodation works in the colleges, right? So you tend to only need to pay for about 30 weeks a year of accommodation. You don't ever really need to rent privately, so you're not paying for the whole year, you're just paying for a fraction of it.
Yeah, and the accommodation's guaranteed as well, so pretty much every college will accommodate every student either in the college itself or in college-owned houses. So yeah, really no need to engage with the private rented sector.
Okay, so time for our next question, which is, are independent school students disadvantaged in the selection process?
So we get asked that question a lot. We also get asked if state school students are disadvantaged in the selection process, and of course the truth is that this is something that's getting more and more competitive each year. What we're interested in doing is identifying those students who've got the most academic ability and potential to come and study on our courses.
And part of identifying that potential is understanding people in their context. So that's not about whether a student's attending a maintained or an independent school, for example. That's about whether a student is attending a high-performing school, perhaps a bit about the socioeconomic background of the community, perhaps a bit about whether that community regularly progresses to university, right?
Yeah. And that context is so important in judging academic potential, which is what we're in the business of doing, as you both say.
Okay, so who wants to take the next one?
It's probably my turn. Okay. So what support is available to help students settle in and adjust?
Yeah, good question. So the colleges all have a kind of formalised peer support system, the college family system, a lot of colleges call it. So you are assigned as an incoming student. So a couple of older students who are your college parents who have similar interests to you to kind of look out for you and introduce you to college life from the student perspective. A lot of colleges also are increasingly developing bridging programs, bridging courses to help you settle in socially, academically, or both in the run-up to joining.
An important part of academic settling, I think, is meeting your director of studies. So that's the person in Cambridge who looks after you intellectually whilst you're here. And so often, very early in that settling period, a student will meet with their director of studies. The director of studies will explain perhaps how lectures are going to work, classes, labs, perhaps maybe even set an early piece of work to help that settling process.
And as well as a DOS, everyone will have a personal tutor. So we're all personal tutors. We all have our tutees that we look after. So so kind of any health issues. You know, I've had terribly homesick students who've really successfully got through the course in the end after a rocky start. So yeah, lots and lots of different sorts of support available to everybody coming in.
Okay, let's have a look for our next question, which is, what is the difference between the colleges and how do you choose which to apply for?
So colleges are a base for your studies, and so if you're wanting to choose a college, think about accommodation, the way they feed you, location, facilities on offer, but do know that we move people around to make sure that the best candidates get in. So don't kind of put massive amounts of energy into choosing. Don't, think it's a disaster if you don't get into that college. Everybody loves their college wherever they end up.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's really important to stress as well that there's very little difference between the colleges in the grand scheme of things, right? So it's not a huge decision. The vast majority of students here really love their college wherever they are, whether they've chosen it, whether they've been allocated it, because you can make an open application if you can't decide, or whether you've been placed in a different college through the winter pool or the summer pool.
And I suppose that's one of the exciting things about a collegiate university environment, isn't it? That you apply for a core course, but there's this array of places that you might end up living, and that's a great thing about being here at Cambridge, I think.
All right, time for the next question. So, what is the most important part of the application process?
In short, none of them. So we do expect to see that people are predicted at or more normally above the typical entry-level requirements. But aside from that, all of the different elements of the application play into the process. We do call it a holistic process. So it is looking at each of the different bits of information we've got and weighing it all up. So your academic profile, your any written work that you've sent us, any admissions assessments that we've asked you to do, how you do it in the interview itself, all of those things will get weighed up against the contextual information that we hold on everybody. And it really is about identifying the students who are going to come onto the course and thrive. Okay, next question. What is the criteria for interview success?
For me, I think those criteria are being willing to problem solve. So the point in a Cambridge interview is to kind of simulate the way we teach, right? And in the way we teach, we're working with our students, whatever the subject is, on problems. And so the interview is to give us an opportunity to see whether the students who've applied to us like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking for people who are able to think on their feet and are able to think beyond the bounds of the knowledge they already have and do well when exposed to new information and new problems.
Okay, my turn, I think. Right. Is the student workload manageable?
Yeah, it's absolutely manageable, but it is high, and we're open about that. We're looking for students who really enjoy what they've applied to study and have a genuine interest in it, and it's really important, I think, that students have that in order to thrive here. There's extensive opportunities to participate outside of your studies, which is great, but your work needs to be, I think, your priority whilst you're here, and if it's not your priority when you're applying, then it may be a sign that Cambridge isn't the right place for you to apply, and that's absolutely fine.
So we tend to encourage students to think about it as a full-time job, don't we? So, maybe it's 40, 45 hours a week. But even, 45 hours a week, I've often heard people talk about the 8-8-8 rule. So you work 8 hours a day, you sleep 8 hours a day, because that's really important. But you've also then got another 8 hours where you can do lots and lots of other things. And our students do. They engage with sport, music, drama, politics, all kinds of things at all kinds of levels.
And those other things might actually be really important to helping them work really efficiently as well, right? So it's not a sense in which your work completely subsumes everything else. That balance for the overwhelming majority is a really important part of being here. Having that time to do other things can help make the workload more manageable, however it is.
All right, next one. My son is academically capable but shy and a little hesitant to speak out. Will the interview process cater for that?
So the interview process will probably actually suit him quite well because it's a very, very common profile for our applicants. And remember, it's about that sort of in-depth academic engagement. So it's a small setting, 2 interviewers, 1 candidate normally. So he will be able to directly answer their questions, possibly even work through problems on paper if he's applying for one of the science type courses. And it's really not about social confidence or polish or any of those things. It's about, can you engage academically with the ideas? So as long as he's able to express his ideas either sort of speaking out loud or in writing, then that's absolutely fine.
I'd say too that shyness manifests itself in a number of ways. It can manifest itself in a student being quite quiet or reserved, as appears to be the case here, but it can also manifest itself in people being quite, expressive, quite voluble, and either is fine. Our interviewers are used to working with people. If you're a shy person, don't be concerned. Come along, be yourself, engage with the interview.
Okay, next question. What is expected from students during the application process?
That's an interesting one. So I think our minimum expectation is you take it seriously. You respond to the emails that the college you've applied to have been allocated will send you, you hit all your deadlines. And then in terms of what we hope as well, we really hope that an applicant enjoys the process on its own merits, regardless of whether they're successful or not. And taking it in that spirit is also probably the best route to success, I think.
I think in respect of that, I'd also say that we would expect people to be themselves. We say to students, be you. When you're writing a personal statement, for example, genuinely personal, genuinely to you. When you come to interview, be yourself. As an expectation, that helps people hopefully to enjoy it in the way you describe it. Yeah. Okay, let's find our next question, which is having work experience in a particular field essential?
Depends whether you're applying for medicine or veterinary medicine, where we do like to see it. Not essential, there are alternatives, but what it does give you is a realistic sense, hopefully, of what that profession is like, and we are admitting you effectively to the profession when we admit you to the course, which is why that's important.
And outside those subjects, if we're using a very kind of narrow definition of work experience, I think a good way to think about it, and a good question to ask yourself is, can I make what I've done relevant to the subject I'm applying to? If yes, then great, put it in your personal statement, talk about it at interview, think about what you've learned from it, think about what you've observed by doing it, think critically about it. If it's not relevant, you can't make it relevant to the subject, then it's probably best not to put it in.
Okay,
I think it's me,
Chris.
And it looks like this is our last one. So the final question is, how can I offer support during the application process?
Really good question. So, yeah, I think parent supporters can be helpful in just sort of understanding the timings of the process and knowing what's happening at each stage. But I think probably the most useful thing is to minimise any pressure or expectations on the young people applying to us. This is a process in which only a minority of people will come out the other end with an offer, but hopefully everyone who goes through the process will have seen it as a positive experience and will have got things from it themselves.
And remembering, I think, that those young people are the priority in this process, right? They're putting themselves forward with their intellectual interests, their careful choice of course, their really carefully written application. It is they who are at the heart of it, and so letting them be and supporting them as themselves is, I think, really key as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the bowl is empty. We've managed to make it through all the questions. Thank you so much for helping with this session. Hopefully parents and supporters will find this just a really useful source of advice, but if there are any remaining questions, then the website is going to be the first place to look, and if that doesn't answer any remaining issues that people have got, then a college admissions office can also provide advice and guidance for anyone thinking about applying.